So here I am. I'm in Italy with my wife, Jane, and you know that often we are here. We live here spring and fall. And in Italy, they have a tradition, and it's called pranzo, which means the lunchtime. And lunch begins at 1 and it ends whenever. In this case, it ended maybe about 3:30, and I needed to be here online at 4. So that was an interesting moment. But I had my laptop with me just in case, because we know things can go a little long. Piano, piano is the Italian way. Slowly, slowly. We take our time, we savor life. I'm excited to talk to you today about this subject because it's something that I noticed this word woke being used in a derogatory way. Noticed it in a couple of different places, and then I noticed it in more places. And I kept seeing it being brought up by people I didn't expect it to be being brought up by. And I thought, what is this? Why are they using woke as if it's a derogatory thing? Why are they using being awake and aware as a derogatory thing? So I got curious about that. And then I began to think, like everything else that's been sort of taken and co-opted from one culture to another or from one setting to another, how can you take it back and bring it back to its original intention and maybe even lift it some? So that was my personal intention in looking at this. So when I brought it up, I posted on Facebook, I'd be talking about this today. My niece wanted to give me some schooling, and she said, you do know the etymology of this word, and it comes from our African-American culture, and it was used in a song as recently as 2009 by Erykah Badu, when she says, "I stay woke." So then I got curious about the etymology of the word. Of course, it's been used for millennia, as long as humankind has been here. The idea of awakening. But the term woke, I actually looked into the history of it, and it's most documented as something that came out of the African American community, but not just recently, as far back as the 1940s, when people were reminding each other, even though there was this idea of the Emancipation Proclamation and some new laws and some rights that were supposed to be given, the emancipation had been declared but not actually conferred. So there wasn't actually freedom. So they were saying to each other in the 40s and continuing on, stay woke, pay attention to the fact that there's still racism and inequality and injustice that is happening all around you. And it was not to be, in our today's vernacular, negative. It was to help each other and say, I want you to notice that even though these things are on the books, people are behaving in certain ways. Pay attention, stay woke. And Erykah Badu wrote the song, I Stay Woke. As I said, it was in 2009 when she wrote that song. And she talked about the idea of, instead of calling people who are Black or African American names, maybe you should see them as master teachers, because we're staying woke and noticing that the system around us is broke and it needs our attention. So this idea of staying woke and being woke was a form of protection. It was the idea of, let's watch out for them. And it was necessary at the time, and it's necessary now in many settings, to notice that there are people who have intentions that are not beneficial to everyone. So we stay woke to that. So I honor that history and the etymology of staying woke and being woke. And then I thought about, what do I do with it now? It's been co-opted. It's being used now as an insult, as a slur. And I want to be proud of being awake and aware and watching out for. But instead of watching out for them, watching out for all of us. Keeping the high watch. This is the thought that I had. So I wrote in the notes you see, woke. We only know entanglement. So this idea of entanglement, that word came up for me. I'm a little bit of a physics nerd. I love metaphysical things, but I also like quantum physics and the study of all those sciences that are about the energy of how life itself works. And this idea of entanglement won a Nobel Peace Prize because it helped us understand the connections in the universe and how there really isn't a place where they can find disconnection. There's an experiment done with a couple of particles that they were able to separate in space, and they should have had no interaction with each other, according to the science of that moment. But as it turned out, these particles that were once in close proximity, when separated, still had connection with each other. When something would happen to one over there, it happened to the other over here. And this is where science catches up with metaphysicians and the spiritual realm that talks about the idea of the unified life force that we're all in together. At one point, I wrote a piece about how do I see life? And I said, we're all made of the same stuff, which is also science-based. Science lets us know that we're made of the same stuff as the stars. We're stardust. And we share a planet. And what each of us thinks and says and does matters to the whole. This was my own personal manifesto. I wanted to live from a place of understanding that how I think, what I do, and what I say matters to the whole, because we are connected. We are made of the one life and therefore cannot be separated. The separation idea causes, from my perspective, every problem that we have in the world today. If you believe you are separate, you can hate. If you believe you are separate, you can hurt. If you believe you are separate, you can make the other person wrong and you can make them less than. But if you believe that you actually are connected like those particles, and what happens to one happens to the other, you're going to behave differently, you're going to think differently, you're going to say different things. So this idea that we only know entanglement as another way of lifting this idea of being woke, we can be proud of the idea that we only know entanglement. Even those people who may look at me and say, ooh, look at her, that Black lesbian woman. I think she's wrong for being this. She's wrong for being that. She threatens my life, all those things. And they don't recognize that hating on me or wishing me away or not seeing my inherent worth has an impact on them. The particles can't be separated. The people can't be separated. If we only know entanglement, how does it change our behavior? How does it change how we hold each other in our hearts and minds? As I spoke about at the beginning of this, the original content of being woke was to watch out for the dangers. And it's still there, but the dangers are also in our ideas about each other. While we don't want to be foolish, we wear a seatbelt, yet we still drive, right? We turn lights on when it's dark in a room. We want to be reasonable and thoughtful, but we don't want to live in fear. So this idea that there are those against us and those for us is something we want to rethink and only know that we're entangled. Only know that we can't be separated from the other. However they're behaving, they may not know it, but we are tied together in our destiny with them. We may not like that. There are certainly some people that I've met and have run across and I've heard on the internet that I would prefer not to think of as my brother and sister. But that doesn't serve contributing to peace. I have to know that we are connected. I have to know that them hating on me or me hating on them is not conducive to peace. If I say that's what I want, yet I want to separate myself from someone who's going to be excluded from my peace, then I am not living from that idea. If I'm awake to the idea that we are all connected and science is reminding us and confirming for us what the mystics all knew, then I must start with that premise. What does that mean? How do we live every day with the things that are crossing our screens, with the conversations we're having in families and in communities? What do I do with the fact that I'm connected with people who I completely disagree with about how things should be? This is where we turn to the idea of love as a power and a presence and an energy from which we act. Does it mean that we are doormats and that we don't protest when things are wrong? No. Does it mean, again, that I do foolish things and put myself in harm's way? No. Does it mean that I do not use 1 ounce of my energy to be against a person or feel resentment or hatred toward them? Yes, I don't use 1 ounce of my energy for that. I show by my behavior what I expect from them. I show by how I treat people I disagree with what I expect from them. I can say you are wrong, and I don't have to hate you. I can protect myself from your violence, and I don't have to hate you. But I can ask you to correct your ways. We only know entanglement. Therefore, we know that when our brothers and sisters are heading down a path that's destructive for all of us, that we need to let them know that we know and show them another way. I always go back to the wonderful teachers that we rely so much on today from the civil rights movement, otherwise known as Black liberation and people of color liberation and women's liberation in the 60s. Many of them were fueled by love. I appreciate John Lewis and his lesson because he literally faced the boot coming down on his head and still refused to return violence for violence. Didn't mean he didn't want to protect himself. Didn't mean he didn't put an arm up. Didn't mean he might not have pushed someone away who was coming at him. It meant he was not going to use violence in order to try to solve the problem. He was not going to try to treat hate with hate. And we know that the wonderful Dr. Martin Luther King said that love is the only thing that can overcome the hate that we see. And what is it, this hate? It's this false notion that we're somehow separate. If I only knew, and if my brothers and sisters who are out being against others for being their authentic selves only knew that each of us is an aspect of the other. My beautiful transgender family, people who emulate authenticity like no one else on the planet that I'm aware of, because it takes so much courage to step out every day being who you are. We have so much to learn from these master teachers instead of being against and trying to oppress or suppress them. So we only know entanglement. We only know that there is one of us here, even if we differentiate in our expression. Acting from that is the greatest challenge of our life. But acting from that is the greatest gift we can give ourselves and each other. I challenge myself to this every day. Everything that I read, everything that I hear, I send the money, I send the letter, I call the governor's office and make the complaint about what I know should be different. But then I also send love. Also and always love. And those of you who've heard me speak before, I almost always get to that place, right? And she's always going to be about the love. But what else is there? What other fierceness do we have to apply to unifying heart and mind and souls together to have a better planet to share and a better experience to share? I know of no other. May we each stay woke and only know the entanglement of ourselves with every other living being and thing, and may we act from that to the best of our ability every day. Namaste.